Hello, my name is RSS Kragic and I'm professor at KTH in Stockholm, and today I wanted to share some of my own experiences about how to build an academic career. Very shortly about myself, I have received my PhD back in 2001, and after spending some time in US and France, I came back to KTH. Where I have been a full professor since 2007 and held a couple of different administrative leadership positions. And my focus during the past couple of years has been in engagement with industry, but not only or solely through collaborative research projects, but also as an active member of board of directors of large international companies. And the main reason for that is that I wanted to understand more of how the technology that we are developing in the area of robotics can be used to provide better solutions at the, as I said, large-scale organizations that have maybe not yet embraced the research and the technology that we are developing. When it comes to an academic career, it's a long run, it's a marathon, so it will take for most of us 40 plus years of our life. So we also need to feel that the work that we are doing is motivating and that we also can, during those 40 plus years, contribute different things to the community. Now, I think that having in mind that most of us will need to go through the process of tenure track is extremely important. That is a rather complex and can be very stressful process for most of us. So when it comes to the timeline of those 40 plus years, it can look very differently for most of us, apart from the first 7 years, up to 7 years, for reaching the or doing the tenure track. And why I'm stressing this out? Is that, of course, one does not necessarily, it is possible to still build an academic career even if the tenure track process is not something that we go through and so on. And also after tenure track and after reaching the title of a full professor, one can choose to spend more time in industry and so on. And that's why I'm saying that there is no a way of saying that this is how it should look, apart from the fact that the tenure track, I still think it's a process that should be done early in one's career, and that is necessary for actually doing a successful or having a successful academic career. Now, there are certain official things that one needs to do as an academic, and this is that we all need to conduct excellent research and communicate that research in such a way so that the community can, of course, understand and use it, grow, and so on. We need to do teaching because I think that is extremely important to communicate research through teaching to more junior or next generation. We need to engage in supervision at various levels. We are responsible of taking upon us leadership, administrative leadership positions at the university, and also we need to provide community service because I think that that's extremely important, giving back to the community. And all of these are tools that are needed for us to make an impact, build and grow the community we are active in, foster and help next generation to grow. For that reason, also the way of how a career looks like and what we spend time on, if we again go to the timeline, can look very different. So right now I have a pretty big group, 10 plus PhD students, many postdocs. I also work and collaborate internationally, also locally with junior fellows. So I would say that most of my time is to be a scientific leader and a supervisor. Of course, given that the research is financed by projects, I need to be able to manage this, and I'm still trying to myself make sure that I educate myself continuously about what is going on in my and related areas. So I still do see myself as being a researcher. I don't have too much time to teach these days. I do teach 2 courses, so the size of the letter somehow reflects how much time I spend on these different roles. But apart from these official roles, there are also unofficial roles that can take lots of the time on daily basis, and that's being a colleague, friend, parent when needed. And finding the right balance is something that I find it's very challenging because we are not always trained for knowing how to conduct all of these roles and also how much time to spend on them. So what I think is important is to find a good mentor. That mentor can be a senior to you or a junior to you, and discuss, look into, have a good documentation of how much time you spend on different things. And if you feel that you are not effective enough because too much time, too many evenings and too many weekends are going and are spent on work, then discussing with somebody else of how to find the right balance may be a good thing to do. Now, there are many challenges in the work that we are doing, and one of the things I would like to discuss is what are the specific challenges in organizing, not really leading large research groups, because I don't see us necessarily lead. Robotics is I would say, interdisciplinary research areas. It requires, especially when we build large-scale systems, to use expertise from different areas. So it's not so much about leading the research, it's about organizing it in a good way. So what I think is very important is to be able to identify the competence, people that are competent to provide a certain knowledge to the group. So you need to have it as a academic leader or a supervisor, and you need to also be able to identify it. And in order to identify it, it's maybe not enough that you do that yourself, but that you do this collectively, that you use your senior and junior colleagues when employing new people to do the interviews and so on. So use others' expertise and experience also in order to identify the absolute best competence you need for the project or for the work that you are currently doing. You need to also be able to identify and talk about and help people to reach their individual objectives. Yes, we are working and collaborating collectively, but many of the people, especially if you have a large group with many postdocs and so on, they are also competing. They will be competing for the positions on the next level and so on. So I think it's also important to see people as individuals and help them also to both identify themselves, these individual objectives, and also help them to reach them. I think it's also important to develop a good scientific language and culture in the group. What does that mean? For me, it's very much about being fair and open about what we are doing, why we are doing it, how we are doing it, what tools we are using, how we are communicating our research, why do we write papers, how do we write papers, and so on. And many of these topics that I'm talking about are actually discussed by my colleague speakers at this workshop, so I'm not going to go into the details. It's very good to listen to some of them, or all of them, of course. And I think that when it comes to the scientific language and culture, it's extremely important to always maintain a good working environment. So we need to say what is important to us. So we need to have a consistent strategy, and we need to communicate that consistent strategy. So it's something that we have, that we don't change on the daily basis and so on. And also, one of the things that I would like to take up when we work interdisciplinary in large group, it's also very important that we are able to deal with both personal and personnel aspects, which means that we need to know how we are as individuals, but also what are the challenges, for example, that some of our collaborators may have. How do we openly talk about those, and how do we actually use them in the best possible way so that we can optimize then the research outcome and again make an impact to the community. Now, when it comes to the personal development, I think that this is extremely important. As a supervisor and research leader, one will need to keep with the state of the art, and when you don't have the time, you need to still force yourself to read, to review, to write, and to be engaged in organizing workshops, tutorials, conferences, and so on. So again, community work. And in many cases, it's not necessarily that you as a group leader need to always be the one that leads all those initiatives, but that you actually encourage your junior colleagues to do it, and then you help them to make the absolute best job when they are, for example, suggesting to organize workshops at conferences and so on. What I also think is important is to, if there is no many, let's say, international collaboration projects going on in your own lab, to actually stimulate these international collaborations through, for example, sabbatical visits and the like. And of course, for me, having this continuous education, not only in terms of what is going on in my own community, but also being a mentor, finding a mentor and being a mentor. I think that I have learned, or I know that I have learned extremely much from being a mentor of a junior person to understand what the challenges are of the generations that are now building their academic career and so on. And of course, I think that is extremely important and related again to having a consistent research strategy to do short and long-term planning. And the strategy remains. We know what we want to achieve with our research, but then how to actually execute or how to achieve this on short and long term, I think it's extremely important. Then I think it's not only important for me as a research leader to develop, my group also needs the development. That means that all my members or colleagues should be involved in teaching. They should be doing internal presentations of their ongoing work. They should be collaborating with their colleagues. I should encourage them to visit other labs and present their work at other labs. They need to write a lot and present, because the training in writing and presenting is also, or are also, important tools that are going to be needed for them for the rest of their academic career. And I think meetings are important, but not all of the meetings should be held with me present. I encourage lots of meetings to be held without me, and then have a person that summarizes a meeting for me, and so on. And the reason is that I think that developing that responsibility gene, if students already don't have it, is extremely important. And by giving them the ability to be responsible for a meeting, I think helps developing that kind of a behavior. And of course, I think that is important to be able to reflect over things. So if they attend conferences, they should present what they learned, what work they liked, and so on. And I think that it's also good if sometimes you show your other face, if I can say like that, by spending some time out of work also with the students. I think that a SWOT analysis can also be a good tool for you to become more open towards your colleagues. So you can openly say, okay, I do a SWOT analysis on myself and the area I'm active in, and then also ask them to try to do SWOT analysis individually for themselves. And I think that that's kind of like a nice exercise, but it has helped many students also during interviews to write their, both their application letters, but also understand better of what kind of strengths they have, but also what kind of challenges potentially they would need to work with in order to become better in conducting their work. For me, my junior colleagues are usually a very gentle flower that I'm needed for to water. while we are together, but also I don't think that one-to-one relationship is a very healthy relationship. So I'm always trying to, for all of my students, have at least one or two or even three in some cases co-supervisors, so have a whole group of people that are involved in supervision, because I think that we can all provide different, let's say, expertise and insights on the career development and, of course, research. And if it's not my own group or members from my own group, it can be also members from other groups that are involved in co-supervision, and that I think is extremely important. One of the things I'm still learning how to do, of course, is to listen. Sometimes when we have a very complex agenda, I don't have too much time. Listening is usually something we are not so very good in. So I think that it's extremely important to be silent at meetings, listen, encourage people, reassure them. There also to give them constructive criticism to make the work better. I think it's always important for my students to know what I do, where I am. So most of them, or well, all of my students have access to my Google Calendar so that they know when they can book time with me. And this is also something that I think is important, that they should feel that they are free to suggest meeting times based on that they know when I'm free. And also that I'm rather flexible to meet them both directly at work and outside the work environment if the problem that we need to discuss would require that. We work also and discuss very much the career development, what are the things needed to be done in order to be able to develop a successful academic career if this is what the student wants. We also talk about personal aspects, everything that is related to family, friends, and so on. And also talk about difficult topics. So if there is something that potentially needs to be strengthened in a student and so on, or trained, we also talk about how that can be done. And what I also think is important is that all of them do get a possibility to also supervise junior colleagues, master students, interns, and so on, in order to understand better what are the challenges of building and supervising or mentor a group, what these challenges actually are. Now, there is no good recipe on how many leadership positions one should have. I think what is important is to test many different ones. So being a large collaborative project coordinator, for example, or being a director of a center or an institute or a dean, all of those leadership positions have different challenges. We work with different, let's say, both people, sets of people. We also have different responsibilities. So for me, it was extremely important to take upon various leadership positions, because that gave me both the understanding of how the academia works, but also how to get people to collaborate even where they didn't see what the reason for collaboration would be, in order to kind of like raise the collectiveness, let's say, feeling or level of contributing to community through collaboration. Now, head of department, I think it's something that most of those having an academic career will go to. And I think that one of the things I have learned is that working with personnel and making sure that we have a good model for how people contribute in terms of teaching, supervision, external funding, and so on, is extremely important. So that's something that I think needs to be learned, how to communicate what are the expectations on the personnel, and how we can make a fair process so that everybody is treated, of course, equally, and that the expectation on every employee are the same. EU projects, large-scale collaborative projects, are also a challenge in itself, and I have been involved in very many. I think it has been a fantastic experience of seeing how one can work internationally with have a collaboration between 8 European universities, for example. And I think that both leading and evaluating large-scale projects is extremely important in order to both understand how to get people to collaborate on building, I would say, very challenging robotic systems, but also how to never forget that the absolute biggest expectation for all of us is to do excellent research, excellent both basic and applied research, and how we can do this better through international collaboration. When it comes to external funding, most of us will need to spend quite some time during those 40 plus years of applying for projects. My experience and the best projects that I have ever gotten are those that I have spent quite some time on writing the research proposal for. So the first project that I had, which was about €8 million project, I actually spent 2 years on the, let's say, planning before the actual application was made. So making sure that the partners are right, making sure that there is a very clear responsibility of every single person participating in the project, and that that's clear to everybody. And once we had that, it was much easier to sit down and write a project proposal, which was very positively evaluated. So what I think is important is never do things in a hurry. It's better to pass or let not to submit something that is not the best you can do, and that goes both for project proposals and also for research papers. Now, one of the challenges for large integrated projects, I would say, is how to get people to collaborate, given that you will have, like in my case, I had 8 full professors that were very opinionated and just wanted to continue to do their research, and getting people to collaborate was one of the big challenges. But what I think is important is to make sure that from the beginning the role is very clear. So what they should collaborate, and then that some flexibility, of course, is allowed through the time that collaboration actually is conducted. A couple of suggestions: finding good collaborators or good partners. I think that from the beginning people should, of course, believe in, that the idea for the project or the objectives are good people, that both people that actually are able to deliver, but also having people that are visionary, so those that are dragging and say, okay, is this the best we can do? People that are structured and reliable, so that you know that by the deadline they will actually provide what they're expected to provide, and people that want to collaborate. So some people are really excellent in producing fantastic science, but they are not necessarily interested in doing this in collaboration with other people. So that, I think, needs to be taken into account. One important thing is also that for large-scale collaborative projects, I think it's good to avoid to have good friends in the project. Sooner or later, you will need to put requirements of what people should deliver, and having personal liaisons with people, I think, can sometimes mess things up. So just a point of caution there. And then I think that maybe this is almost impossible to do today, but if people already have 10 ongoing projects and you ask them for 11th, it's very likely that they are not going to have time, or at least they're not going to put your project maybe on the priority list. So I think it's important when you look for partners also to look for people that don't have too many things going on. And then daily business for again coordinating projects such as these ones. You need to be a good administrator, or you need to find yourself a good administrator that is going to make sure that you have a good plan for everything that needs to be done, when and what. But that we should also not, overdo the administration in terms of meetings and paperwork. Do the minimum that is required, and then spend all the time on actually conducting excellent science. Not forcing the collaboration, but just to motivate it, show to people how by integrating something, integrating work, algorithms and so on, can actually get something better out of it. And that requires also some time to be spent on assessing your colleagues. And I think that is also something that should be taken into account. Now, the projects that are reviewed, the reviewers for the projects are usually suggested by the consortia. So I think that that's also important. Reviewers should be the people that are not going to criticize you, but actually produce the feedback so that the research that is performed at the project can be done better. And again, as a summary, concentrate on science, not administration. So, a couple of things, and for those that would like to know more about all of these that I have just gone through, please contact me through email and ask questions. Thank you.